we have here at Columbia AIUSA, and there's a lot of material about campaigns against or to abolish the death penalty. And there are some documents that are really fascinating that look at the strategizing that happened in the 80s and 90s. And there was a lot of reference to the really strong local and public support in favor of capital punishment. And that, as you said, has really shifted. I wonder if there is anyone who can speak to what the strategies were in those other decades and how that was advanced in an environment that didn't seem particularly receptive to hearing about.
Actually, might invite Josh if you wanted to share about that.
I'll share one anecdote. We did, Bill Weld was governor of Massachusetts at a time when the state was abolitionist. And at one point he decided he not only wanted to reinstate the death penalty, but he was considering two unusual dimensions to the statute. First, lowering the possible age to 16, and using a firing squad in Massachusetts. So we did two things. It happened that there was an international report about the use of the juvenile death penalty. It was that in the United States, the recognized age, the minimum age at the time of the offense, was under 18. There's evidence someone was 12 years old who was once executed. There were people on death row who were 15 at the time of the crime, many 16 and 17. So Bill Weld wanted to make it 16. And just at the moment when out of London came this very comprehensive report, so we actually had a press conference in the State House. And we got in the hands of the right people, and some people actually were on Weld's staff, who went to his office and put our report on his desk and said, whatever you're going to do, it's not going to be below the age of 18. Secondly, we were in touch with the Boston Globe on this, and I have to say, they didn't, the editor was a friend of mine, and we decided we have to do something about Weld, so we cooked up an editorial together. And I told them that my line that you used in the editorial was a local wag, I'm the local wag, okay? He said that the governor couldn't make up his mind if the death penalty was going to be an episode of Gunsmoke or the Brady Bunch. So we really went after it. And in the end, of course, the initiative failed. But I would say, you know, as Laura said, our strategy was always incremental. You know, we wanted to abolish it. In the meantime, let's see abolition of the juvenile death penalty. And in the end of years ago, the Supreme Court agreed. Let's document how clearly mentally retarded people are executed. And in the end, the Supreme Court agreed. Now, unfortunately, you have states like Georgia that are still testing if they can execute someone who we think is clearly mentally retarded, because, you know, there are gray areas and you get someone to do well in an IQ test when all the other indicators are there. So we still are facing that cynical dimension, but if you take an incremental view, you can get somewhere. I think finally, we have people who are in favor of the death penalty in principle, but who understand that it's administered in such a way that it's an affront to their sense of justice, like Bill Sessions, the former FBI director, William Bob Barr, who was a member of Congress, who was very conservative, but he takes a principled stand. I think the argument that has, Gary Wills wrote an article about the death penalty in the New York Review a few years ago, which you can all look up. And he laid out the conservative argument against the death penalty, which can be summed up in the following way. Ask yourself in your state, what grade do you give your state for clearing snow? What grade do you give your state, your community, for educating your children? For levying taxes? And invariably, Americans never give any government function an A+. Right? Okay, now we're going to let you kill people. We're going to let you decide which people should be killed and which people shouldn't. And that's a more important government function than clearing snow, levying taxes, educating children. And all of a sudden, people go, oh, there we trust the government. And Wills was pointing out that all the skepticism conservatives bring to the government function, government programs, is suspended when it comes to the death penalty. He said they're not being honest with themselves. And so that is also an argument that is starting to weigh on people. 139 people have been released from death row. So I would say two things aside from what our panelist members have said today. First, that yet you have this Innocence Project, the introduction of DNA evidence in a small number of cases, but it's mattered. And this has caught the public's attention. Secondly, there are voices from family members of victims who are saying, you want it, okay, but not in my name. Because frankly, in state legislatures, we often have members of families who've lost someone to murder, who give very impassioned pleas for the death penalty. It's very hard to counter them. You can't debate them. But if you have others who've also lost a loved one, who come forward and say, look, I'm also in anguish. I'm also angry, but I'm not in favor of the death penalty. That starts to make it easier for legislators. I think that's been an issue as well. And finally, cost. I mean, states understand they cannot afford it. And if we ever had a new grade rule that re-regulated the death penalty simply on the question of quality of counsel, so we wouldn't have the rate death penalty, which is what we have now. If you made states provide serious attorneys and money for research for indigent defendants, the states would stop because they don't want it. So those are the issues we've raised that have really affected legislatures and public opinion, even for people who in theory, are in favor of that.
I'm in the campaign in the death penalty, and one of the strategies we use in Illinois, and we really advocate with any abolitionist movement, is to go in and mingle and talk to and be with people in the death house. And we did that in Illinois, and we discovered a thread of people who were saying that they were tortured. And we brought them together, and out of that came the John Burge issue, where the John Burge was the police lieutenant or captain or whatever who oversaw the torture and forced confessions of I think it was like 12 or 13 different men. And we brought them together, we organized them, and we publicized their issue. As a result of that, Governor Ryan, whom we met with, he actually came out to one or two of our meetings. He came out and listened to these guys' parents, etc. And as a result, he actually imposed a moratorium and then commuted the sentences of every single man and woman in the Illinois death house. So I think one approach is to get involved and show that these are human beings we're talking about, because the state likes to isolate them and give us the impression that these are animals, these are vicious people that we must do away with. I would definitely advocate that being a grassroots approach, going in, corresponding with, being involved with people who are facing the death penalty.
Yeah, I have two questions. One, I heard Laura talk about how all the organizations came together around the penalty things, particularly around the whole Troy Davis. I think there's a real big buzz on it. I think as an activist myself, I haven't marched on every issue in the world almost, and violence in particular. Maybe we could come up with something major where we could all come up together, well, even if it goes in terms of internationally, as to how we can stop the violence in terms of the death penalty. That's violence also. I think that there should be a major march somewhere. Maybe we should take it to D.C. I don't know who we should go against, but I think just like, as she said, around the whole Troy Davis thing, because a lot of people have even stopped talking about it. I mean, he was killed, it was a big thing around it. Some people have forgotten about it already. I think that if we're serious about the issue, and collectively, since we have so much strength and power and unity around it, we should come together and stop the nation around while we have the attention in some sense. And then we can go back and forth on how we can do that as organizations collectively, but I think that should be put on the table if we're serious about this whole issue. The other question I have is, I've often heard about people that were executed, and over the years they found out after sometime after they were killed that they were innocent. What happens in cases like that? If you find a person was there a lawsuit? Were their families compensated as a result of that inmate life being taken away? I haven't been able to follow that, but I've heard people that have really been into the death penalty, I should say, that some people actually have been killed. They found out they were innocent. So maybe you all are experts that have more information on that, but I'm curious to find out, one, how many people that has actually happened to, that they actually found out was completely innocent after they killed them, and what did they do about it as a result for, you know, the families or whatever?
Well, that's really it.
Well, I mean, it's a good question. There, you know, there's the exonerees who are not considered
Right.
ordinarily are able to, are ordinarily compensated in some type of way. Often they'll sue the officials who like them in the place where they are in terms of being at that house. But I don't know of a situation where a person who was actually executed and was later exonerated, not only innocent, was a compensation for the family, anything like that. I think more often than not, the inclination of every actor within the system is to sweep that type of case under the rug, that type of case. I think a good example of that is what happened in Texas with execution. There was a really lengthy article in the New York about the horrible junk science behind his conviction. Is, I think, more than clear to most neutral observers that he was probably not guilty, which is essentially the same thing as burden of proof in criminal court. And Rick Perry, who's now running for president, basically disbanded the commission that was set up to investigate the points on in that particular case, and did everything in his power to make sure that none of that information comes to light. So, you know, I think more often than not, the effort is to kind of push those cases under the rug and super big on the rug and push that information to the side.
Yeah, on the first part of what we were talking about, you're not very typical. I have a feeling you would go out in the streets on just about any justice issue, yeah? And I think what we found with Troy Davis is, because I was doing work on the death penalty in Georgia for maybe 11 years, and it was very difficult to turn people out before hours of education events or come to the lobby day we're working on a moratorium bill. But what we've got to do as activists is find those cases and those issues that get to people. And so I think that's why we have this three-pronged strategy, and we're trying to find other cases that get to people and help us to tell a story and make it more real. Because there's so many powerful statistics that just, I mean, you just feel like, God, the material is there. Why do we still have this damn thing? You know, it's not for lack of good data or good arguments. It's that injustice does not end, and human rights are never advanced because it's right. Things change when people get organized, and they figure out strategies to help move towards change. So I think that the case strategy is one, and the state strategy is another. And so our hope is, with the Reggie Clemens campaign, that we can stir up that same kind of sense of decency. I don't think this is a bloodthirsty country. I really don't. I think, you know, there's been some sophisticated polling work that's been done about people's opinions about the death penalty and broader issues. And one of the concepts that resonates most strongly is the concept of fairness. And the issue of innocence is another one that resonates really strongly. I think you have to have lost your mind to want an innocent person to be executed, right? So that a case that has that element is also very powerful. And I think because Troy Davis had this innocence claim, it helped people to identify with him as a human being. And there was a lot of work that had to be done to get to that point, because he was the monster for so long. He was the cop killer. And the first stories that we were getting placed about Troy Davis, headlines were always the cop killer. You know, and then finally started to shift and just use his actual name, Troy Davis, and not the cop killer in all the headlines anymore. So I think it's a matter of sort of picking these strategic cases and figuring out how to kind of tap into what's going on in this country, what people's concerns are. And like I said, I hope that we can do that again with other cases and get people to understand some of the state policy work that needs to happen. And I think the stories that are being told by murder victim family members, as Josh referenced, and the exonerees are very powerful messengers that can help us galvanize that support so we get more people come and join you in the industries.
I think we're going to do the last two comments now. We've gone to our comment.
Having been there, having waited to die, and I've been involved in the abolitionist movement since the day a judge looked at me and actually told me the date and time that I would expire. Perhaps my approach, I like the question, because I can go. I like the question. What about the abolitionist community coming together to put together a march on Washington, similar to the Million, something like the Million Man March, right? Or to come together and have a day that we go to Washington D.C. And also, I mean, I'm about trying to end this thing, and I've been calling for a boycott. We did it in South Africa and it worked. Let's put our money where our mouths are. In fact, let's keep our money and boycott some of Georgia's, because it seemed to begin and end with Georgia. Let's put our money where our mouths are. Let's keep our money, stop buying Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, stop buying Jiffy peanut butter, and put some pressure on them in that way. AT&T is there. I mean, let's, CNN, although it's not, it's Vegas, CNN is there. So let's sort of kind of approach it.
I mean, I think, both those are tremendously effective and great ideas in terms of trying to change discourse in this country. I think one of the things about death penalty, and maybe something that would also be helpful, is if we think about the death penalty and we think about how flawed it is as a system in general. And the reason why we're so focused, our focus is so close to it, there's so much attention. And rightfully so, because the stakes are so very high. Because someone's life is on the line, so that's literally a life or death situation. And when all the cameras are focused on those types of cases, when all the courts and judges and lawyers are focused on those types of cases, when the public is focused on those types of cases, we see the flaws in the capital punishment system. But those same flaws are true throughout the entire criminal justice system. And so in many ways, that penalty is kind of the thread that if you pull on it hard enough, this entire criminal justice system would fall. Because a lot of this is involved in terms of racial bias, in terms of judicial bias, in terms of police misconduct, in terms of prosecutorial misconduct, in terms of access to resources, financial resources. All those concerns, who we police, why we police certain people, all those things are prevalent, prominent death penalty cases and run again in criminal cases, of course, across the country every day. So I think as long as we continue the conversation and talk to people beyond just this room, but folks who may be on the fence about death penalty but have real problems with the way criminal justice is administered in this country, continue the conversation in that regard and change kind of the discourse, because courts do pay attention to what public opinion is. Legislators do pay attention to whether or not this is going to get them any votes. That type of discourse is really what is needed, because in order to kind of create that change, we need to give the legislators and judges and decision makers the courage to do these things. So as we continue to organize and continue to push forward, hopefully, some of these solutions will get to where the end of this penalty.
And to be continued, I think, even immediately now, we're going to do something.
Yes, we'll have a right now. And there's
items of section. So there's tons of food, so I didn't see the drink.